We are going to get started. It's wonderful to have you here either in person, especially in person, and to have you here on Zoom as well. It's good to have you all. We are going to Im Yirtzeh Hashem B'li Neder finish up the Ksuba today. We still have a chunk of things to do, but we'll finish up the Ksuba today, hopefully. And then we have one more piece here, and that is creating a halachic will that we'll touch on next week, and then back to Chodesh. Okay. When do we break for? We have some time. We have some time to break for Pesach. Yeah, we have some time. Baruch Hashem, we have some time to break for Pesach. Okay, so first of all, for those of you on Zoom, I apologize for our connection issues last time. We're on a Wi-Fi connection here in the Chalfin room, which for some reason just went. So my apologies. You can, on my website, you can pick up the shir. I tried to incorporate the ksubos that we had on the screen in the recording as well. Give me just a second. I'm going to pull up the ksubos from last time, so bear with me for a second.
Rabbi?
Yes, Brenda.
I had asked if you could dedicate the shir.
Yes. Okay.
Right.
So we are going to dedicate this shir in memory of Brenda's father. The Yurtzeit was actually 2 weeks ago, I think.
No, my mother was 2 weeks ago.
Your mother was 2 weeks ago. Okay.
I also sponsored that, but it didn't happen. And my father's was this week.
Okay, so it is Le'ilui Nishmas. We'll mention both of your parents. Le'ilui Nishmas.
Chaya Odel Bat Reb Yaakov Lev.
And your father?
Bitzalel Ben Abraham Yehuda.
Okay, Yirtzeh Hashem, their neshamos should have an aliyah. I remember both of them very well, and I'm sure there are many here as well who remember them. Their neshamos should have an aliyah. Okay, I'm going to disconnect the screen here for a second just to pull up the ksubo, so bear with me. You guys on Zoom should still be there. So what do we have? So this is the ksuba. We've gone through much of the ksuba. Okay, we've gone through much of it. Oh gosh, I'm sorry.
Keep it big.
What?
Keep it big.
I'm trying.
I know.
Okay, right? So we've gone through this whole first top part, okay? The specifics, the day of the week, the day of the month, the year, which particular year, where we are and what city we are, and then the names, so-and-so, the son of so-and-so, said to so-and-so, the daughter of so-and-so, and we indicate if she's a virgin or if she's not a virgin. Okay. And then he says, be my wife according to the practice of Moses and of Israel. Okay, good. Now here's where I want to focus in. We mentioned last time that there are 10 obligations that are binding on a Jewish man towards his wife. Okay, 10 obligations. Do you remember those 10 obligations?
She wrote them down.
Okay, I'm gonna run through them very quickly. Okay? There were 3 that we said were the major ones. Mizonos. Mizonos is food. Ksus is clothing. Ona are sexual relationships. Those are the main 3 that are noted specified in the ksuba. Okay, specified in the ksuba. Then there are 7 more. Of those 7 more, there are there's only one that is specified in the ksuba, right? So you have mizonos, ksus, ona that are specified in the ksuba, not in that terminology. Different terminology is used, okay? And then you have ksuba itself. The ksuba we mentioned was the mohar, the bride gift that the husband gave to the wife initially when they first got married, but subsequently changed and was a legal debt that he incurred to be paid at the termination of the marriage, either through divorce or death. Okay, that's 4. That's ksuba. Now, the remaining 6 are not mentioned in the ksuba. And what are they? Refuah. He has an obligation to heal her, to pay her medical bills. Kavura. He has an obligation to bury her. That's number 6. Mizonos vidiur acharei misa. He has an obligation to continue to provide food for her and a dwelling place for her after he dies, until, of course, she remarries, if she ever remarries. Mizonos habanos. He has an obligation to pay for the support of her daughters until they're married. They might not be his daughters, right? Her daughters until they're married. And finally, something that we say, what we call ksubas banim duchrin, which he has an obligation to, before his estate is divided up upon his death, her sons who might not be his sons, in other words, if she has children from a previous marriage, her sons are entitled to the value of her ksuba from the estate. Meaning, take the ksuba from the estate, pay it to her sons, and then divide up the estate among the rest of his sons, right? So to speak. So those are the 10 obligations.
Even if it's a second marriage, you have to do that? Well,
Only if it's a second marriage. If it's his first marriage, her sons are his sons.
right.
Only in a case of a second marriage. Okay? Okay, now, it's a second marriage. It's very interesting. Could be a third marriage for her even. Who knows? Yes?
What's with Dior Acharei
No.
Mita? You mean for her family? She's gone.
No, his death, not her death. His death.
Oh, his death. Right.
In other words, he dies. Not only does he have to take care of her, but he has to take care of her daughters. Right? In other words, he has to provide food and shelter for her. He needs to provide food for her unmarried daughters. And when he dies from his estate, her sons that are not his sons are entitled to her ksuba. Okay? Complicated, right? Not so simple. Now, why are only 4 of these obligations in the ksuba? It's interesting. Think about it, right? We only have 4 of these obligations in the ksuba. We have mizonos, we have ksus, we have ona, and we have ksuba. Those are the only 4 that are actually mentioned in the ksuba. Right? You see, I don't think that you see it in the. You do see it a little bit. He says, and I here present you with the marriage gift of virgins, because this ksuba that I have on the screen is written specifically for virgins, right? With the marriage gift of virgins, 200 silver zuzim, which belongs to you according to the laws of Moses and Israel. That's the ksuba. It's called Ikar HaKsuba. It's the essence of the ksuba. It's the bride's gift, 200 zuzim for a virgin. Okay? How much is 200 zuzim? We'll talk about. But that's obligation number 1, which is mentioned in the ksuba. She has a financial claim to this 200 zuzim when either they are divorced or he dies. She has a claim to that. Hang on just a second. Then it says, see if I can, oh gosh, so sorry. Technologically challenged. Okay, then it says, and I will also give you your food, right? Mizonos, clothing, ksus, and necessities. Some, include the broader category of ksus, okay? and live with you as husband and wife, sexual relationships, according to universal custom. According to universal custom. Let me show you this wording in the Aramaic, okay? Okay, here we're up here, okay? V'yahivna lichi mohar bisulaichi, and I give to you the mohar, right? The bride gift of you being a virgin, which is kesef zuze ma'asan. 200 zuz, the chazilichi midioraisa, which is which you are deserving according to Torah law. And we mentioned there's a basic debate about whether or not this is a Torah obligation or a rabbinic obligation. If you look in Susan's ksuba, which is a Sephardi ksuba, right? Jenny's ksuba, Jenny's ksuba, which is a Sephardi ksuba, you will see that that word midioraisa does not appear, because the position of the Sephardim is that it is not a biblical obligation. So they simply say, kesef zuze ma'asan dechazi lichi, period, which you're entitled to. They don't say durabanan, it's understood, it's implicit. They just say the chazi lichi, but every Ashkenazi ksuba says the chazi lichi midioraisa. Fascinating halachic question. What happens if a Sephardi gets married to a woman using an Ashkenazi ksuba that says midioraisa? Right? It's a fascinating halachic question. Now I'm going to go into it. Hold on. Hang on just a second. I'm sorry, Tina. I just want to, right? My apologies. Okay. And then it says, umizonaichi, right? What's mizonaichi? Mizonaichi is food. Uksusaichi is clothing. Visipukaichi and other needs, right? Including living together as husband and wife. Right? According to all of the other laws. Okay, good. So far, so good. Right? Those are the 4 obligations that are written in the ksuba. Why not the other 6? What happened? Why not say I have to heal you? If you're sick, I have to pay your medical bills. Why not say I have to bury you? Why not say I have to pay for you for your food after I die and your dwelling after I die? Why not say I have to pay for your unmarried daughter? Why not include all of those things in the ksuba? Anybody want to take a wild guess?
There's not enough money.
No, no. She can collect all of these things.
But if he doesn't have an estate.
Even though they're not in the ksuba, she can collect all of these things.
Maybe a lengthy
Right?
Yeah,
document
What?
Considered
maybe a
implicit.
lengthy document reading would be a tircha de tzibura.
So Sue is very practically oriented, thinking about the time that chuppah takes, right? And if I have to read a very long document, so people are going to be even more bored than they normally are when the rabbi speaks. So why read such a lengthy document? We'll keep the document shortened. So it's implicit, but it's not contained in the chuppah, in the
right.
ksuba. And you're saying it's because of practical considerations. Anybody have another thought, Tina?
I think the ones that are not written have a more pessimistic sadness to them, and you don't want to introduce any kind of sadness or foreboding into this optimistic document, which is not read in English. It's read in Aramaic, which I think should be changed. Even though it's tradition, even though people should know.
Okay, all right, good. Yeah, I hear you. Okay. All right, so Tina's position is the one that seems to be the predominant opinion as to why they are left out. Because pasnisht, who wants to talk in a ksuba about death, burial, children from a previous marriage, it's pasnish. So it's not included in the traditional Ashkenazi ksuba. And it's generally not even included in a traditional Sephardi ksuba, although I have seen some that have much more specificity than an Ashkenazi ksuba. You get married with a traditional Sephardi ksuba, man, you got it. You're set, right? Because everything is spelled out with I's dotted and T's crossed, And we'll see that. We'll go in and we'll look at that a little bit, okay?
Rabbi?
Yes, Beverly.
Yeah, but it wouldn't be appropriate to talk about previous children, her previous children anyway, because it says this is for virgins, so she wouldn't have previous.
No, that's true. That's true. But not every woman who gets married is a virgin. For some they're widows. For us, others they're divorced.
This document, in the words of the document, it says.
Bisulta, but that's all. Right, but that's only because I copied the Bisulta Ksuba, right? Generally, when you get a Ksuba, it's fascinating, right? Right? You know, talk about HIPAA laws, right? You get a Ksuba, so they say you want a Ksuba for a virgin or not? You know, it's like, right? It's like, hello, right? So, but it's something that, right? You need to know. Right, you need to know, are you getting a ksuba? I think they generally say, is it for a woman who has never been married before, right? Or is it for a woman who has been married before? That's how they generally, broach the subject. But Beverly, the standard, a regular ksuba, you have to write that in. It's not written in. The name, the place is not written in. The dates are not written in. The names are not written in. The amounts are not written in. The status of the woman is not written in. Those are all things that are subsequently written in. Now, obviously, you go to buy a ksuba online. There are, sometimes they're written in, and you just buy them like that, and then you add the. But that's the only reason, Beverly, is because. And you're right. A woman who's a basula doesn't have other children from a previous marriage, or hopefully not. Yes, Tina.
Let's say, I don't know about in those days, but human nature is human nature. Let's say he discovers she's not a basula. Does that abrogate this contract?
No. So remember, what is the contract? Right. This is a financial obligation that the man takes upon himself. And there is a minimal obligation that he has to take upon himself, but there is no maximal obligation that he takes upon himself. So if a man wanted to accept more of an obligation upon himself, that's perfectly fine. In other words, let's say that the man wanted to accept upon himself an obligation for 200 zuz, even though his wife was not a basula, that would be perfectly fine. But we wouldn't write the word basula in the ksuba. Why not? Why not? Right? Why is it so important? I will tell you, there are cases where I've had a woman who's a convert, or I had a woman who was clearly not a virgin, and people generally didn't know that, and we signed one ksuba, but we read a different ksuba. Now, people who are there would never know that that's happening unless they are sharp enough to watch what's. In other words, you guys now are sharp enough to know. You might, if you were watching carefully what was going on, you might pick that up. Right, you might pick that up, but the average person who's sitting who's sitting there doesn't. So if let's say you would know someone's a convert, and then you would hear the rabbi not read a ksuba for a convert, you would say, he's reading it. He's reading a different ksuba because most people don't know, right? So and that's sometimes what happens.
The woman who never consummated the marriage that happens a lot where they didn't have the guidance, they didn't consummate the marriage for a year or two while they were married.
Yes, and that does happen, but go ahead. What are you asking?
Actually, a betula. She's a betula. So what are you using?
Wait, you're saying and then he dies?
No, she just remarries. She never really consummated. It happens a lot. Psychologists know that, people never got to where they needed to be.
No, Rosie's raising the question. I'm not sure exactly what she's asking. Rosie's raising the question that there are circumstances where a couple gets married. I mentioned it to you previously. There are circumstances where a couple gets married without having the proper knowledge of how to engage in sexual relationships, and the marriage is never consummated through sexual relationships. They are not successful in having sexual relationships, primarily because they don't know how to have sexual relationships. And I know in a world like, in a more modern world, that might seem incredulous, but it happens.
Well, there might be a dysfunction.
But then they separate, so what kind of a ketubah do you use?
No. So let's say they then get divorced, right? They then get divorced, and this woman remarries. You would use a basula ksuba, assuming that again, that would require a level of knowledge that would probably not be so readily available. Right? It would probably embarrass her, and again, I think pretty much every rabbi is going to assume that if you were married before, you are not a basula. I think pretty much every rabbi is going to assume that. So, I don't know.
So the term basula is almost like an ideal, perfect, untouched, and that's the way the ketubah needs to reflect her, right? I mean,
I don't want to get into a moral judgment, which is what you might be suggesting,
No.
right?
No, it just
But
makes it
but
better. I mean,
in other words, again, if you're on Zoom, I'm getting a message that the internet connection is unstable. I hope I haven't lost you. Anybody on Zoom still?
Yes,
You're still here.
yeah.
I haven't lost you. Okay. All right, good. Okay. All right, if I lose you, yell, but I guess that's not going to help. Okay, so we have this idea, we do have this idea that there is a higher amount of money. Shh. We do. I thought it was always men in shul talking, but we don't have a monopoly over it, right? So it is true that there is a higher value in the ksuba due to a woman who is a basula as opposed to a woman who is not a basula, right? It's true. Now, you can explain that in different kinds of ways. In a society, I mean, I would venture to say that even in today's society, there is probably a preference for someone who's never been married before to marry someone who's never been married before. There is a preference to that. Now, it doesn't always happen. Sometimes someone who's never been married before, a man who's never been married before, winds up marrying a divorcee or a widow. It happens. But I don't think that, I think even in today's society, the average single man who's never been married before is if he's at the beginning of his journey to find a spouse, is probably going to be looking for a woman who's never been married before. That seems to be, if you want to say the ideal, that seems to be the ideal, and that's what's reflected here in the ksuba. Yes?
Who came up with these 10 provisions?
So these 10 provisions are referred to by a general descriptive term of Tanai Beis Din, and they're attributed to the Sanhedrin Hagdolah, right? That the Sanhedrin Hagdolah were the ones who established that these responsibilities are binding upon a husband. And Shimon ben Shetach, in the times of the Tanaim, legislated that 4 of them be written down. These obligations, by the way, are binding whether there's a ksuba or no ksuba. It doesn't matter. In other words, if a man and a woman get married and there are witnesses to the wedding and it's a kosher wedding, even if there's no ksuba, these obligations are binding upon the man. Just we have a problem that she doesn't have the proof, right? That makes it a little bit easier for her. But these are nevertheless binding upon her.
How enforceable is this?
What?
How enforceable?
Enforceability is a completely separate issue.
Different class.
Completely separate issue. No, it's not going to we're not going to get there. Right? Enforceability is a completely separate issue. In a nutshell, it's not an enforceable document. Why? Because we have a separation of church and state here in the United States.
But in ancient Israel.
Right? In Israel, it wasn't. In Israel, it was a perfectly enforceable document. In other words, not in Israel today, right? Not in Israel today. Although it might be more enforceable in Israel today than it is in America. But certainly in America, it's not an enforceable document. So what was created in place of this? The prenup. The prenup, in its many iterations, is essentially a translated ksuba. It's basically saying that the man has a financial obligation to the woman, which is what the ksuba says. The essence of the ksuba is that the man has a financial obligation to the woman. And that's what's here, right? This financial obligation that the man has to the woman. The prenup basically says, the man has a financial obligation to the woman, and until they are halachically divorced, that financial obligation continues to accrue. And since this is now a secular document that we've signed, she can go into court to claim the money which is due her. That pressure is what's supposed to help to convince the man to give the get. Right? It's basically financial pressure on the man to try to convince him to give the get. Okay?
If the marriage was not consummated and it ends in divorce, is that a deterrent for the man to say, listen, I don't have to fulfill my end of the obligation?
It's an interesting question. I don't know the answer. I don't know. Okay, next part of the ksuba. There is, right, so the man has taken upon himself an obligation of 200 zuz. We're going to just talk about a basula just as a standard. It's half of that. If the woman has been married previously, it's 100 zuz. Okay, and that is clearly midurabanan. You won't see the word midioraisa, even in Ashkenazi ksuba for that. It's 100 zuz for a woman who was previously married, divorced, widowed. 100 zuz for a convert. Okay, it's 100, but 200 zuz otherwise, okay? That's one obligation, 200 zuz. But he's also taken upon himself, right, mizonos, ksus, ona, right? Mizonos has a monetary value to it. Ksus has a monetary value to it. We don't write the monetary value in the ksuba, but these are financial obligations that are upon the man. So it's not just 200 zuz, it's whatever it costs to sustain her food-wise. It's whatever it costs to provide clothing for her. And there's a halacha about when you are obligated to provide clothing to your wife. There's no halacha about how much clothing you are obligated to provide to your wife, right? That is more consistent with what is the minhag hamakom, right? What's the custom in the community in which you live, right? If the custom in the community in which you live is to buy your wife a new sheitel once a year, okay. So then you buy your wife a new sheitel once a year. If the custom of the community where you live is to buy every single woman in shul comes into shul with a Gucci bag, okay, so you have to buy your wife a Gucci bag. All right? If the custom in shul is not that way, if the custom in the community is not that, you have to live according to the custom of the community. So,
Arbitrary. Still,
You know how under the chuppah you have to make sure that the young man, or whatever, the groom, the husband, bought the ring with his own money and all that. What about the minhag hamakom and all these kollel communities or whatever, where the father of the boy or the mother of the father of the girl are actually giving the mizonos and the ksus, and in other words, that responsibility doesn't necessarily have to fall on this groom.
according to the ksuba,
It does.
it does.
But
I mean, we spoke once before about what happens if a woman wants to forego what she's entitled to for the ksuba. In other words, you can have an arrangement that goes beyond the ksuba, right? Now, none of these things, so for instance, let's say that there was a woman who married a kollel guy and her family was sustaining them, and her family went bankrupt. could no longer sustain them. She has every right in the world of enforceability where ksubos are enforceable. She has every right to make sure that her husband pays. Bizonos ksus, right? She has every right to do that, to claim that. Okay, yeah, okay, last question.
Okay, it's the last one on my list also. So, the fact that the Ashkenazi Ksuba has dioraisa, and the fact that the Sephardi doesn't, does that make it a little easier for a get?
No,
It
nope,
doesn't.
nope, not, doesn't make one, doesn't make one bit of difference. Doesn't make one bit of difference.
Really?
Okay, yep. Because a get is the oraisa, right? A get is a biblical, a get is a biblical mechanism. I don't want to say it's a biblical mitzvah, but it's a biblical mechanism, a get. So it counters anything else which is biblical. Okay, let's go weiter. So, what else is in the ksuba? Right, we've talked about these 4 values. What else is in the ksuba? There is something called a nedunya. Right, what is a nedunya? It's a dowry. Right, it's a dowry. Different than a mohar. Mohar is the bride's gift. A nedunya is a dowry that the family of the kala would provide to the kala, and which is actually written into the ksuba. All right? You'll see it here. I'll show it since we're in the Hebrew side. I'll show you already. It says, Utzvias maras. You see the cursors? There, yeah. Utzvias maras. Everybody on Zoom, somebody tell me you're still there.
We're here.
Okay,
I'm
good.
here.
Okay. Utzvi. Right? I can't see you on the screen. I get nervous. Utzvias maras, whatever her name is, Bisultada. Sophie Bisultada. Vahavas leile into v'danedunya dahana'alas le mi be'abuha. And the nedunya which she brings from her father's house. She's bringing a nedunya, she's bringing a dowry from her father's house. Bein bekesef, bein bezahav, whether it's silver, whether it's gold, bein betachshitin, whether it's jewelry, b'mane de levusha, whether it's clothing, b'shimushe dira, or whether it's real estate, right? Right? Whatever it is, it's not specified in the ksuba. It's not specified in the ksuba. She is bringing this dowry, this nedunya. What are her rights to this nedunya?
Is it a gift to him?
No,
Ah,
it is not a gift to him.
or is it mixed finances?
There are 2 kinds of property that she brings into this relationship. There's something called nichse melug and nichse tzon barzel. I don't know if you've ever heard those terms before. One kind of property the husband is entitled to use and does not need to reimburse her for its consumption. And she is also, it belongs to her, but he's allowed to use it. Whether he needs permission or not is an interesting question,
Trust?
right? The second kind is if he uses it, he has to reimburse her for whatever he uses. And she's entitled to that nedunya at the end of the marriage. Okay? Right? So far, what is this woman entitled to? She's entitled to her ksuba at the end of the marriage. She's entitled to her ksuba. She's entitled to the value of her nedunya, either the actual nedunya, if there's any sheep left, or the value of those nedunya, of that nedunya. She's entitled to support of food and shelter. Those are the things she is entitled to when the marriage terminates.
What happens if she's a...
Now hold on a second. The ksuba doesn't tell us how much the nedunya is. And we have a fascinating mechanism. And what is that? That the chassan agrees to accept the nedunya for a value of 100 zukukim of kesef. Right? Did you ever hear that term zukukim kesef? 100 zukukim kesef? And look what it says here. It says, Hakol kibel alab so and so chassan dinan. B'meya zekukim kesef tsaruf. What does he say? He says, I'm going to accept upon myself this financial obligation of your nedunya for symbolized or concretized or quantified as 100 zukukim of silver.
Pure silver.
We're going to talk about the amounts. 100 zukukim of silver. Okay?
Dinan,
What?
dinan. It's always Hassan dinan.
Our chassan. Dinan means ours, right? Or the chassan referred to in this document. Chassan dinan.
Rabbi, what happens if she's a poor girl?
Okay, so wait a second. Why was the nedunya? Why is there such a thing as a nedunya? The Gemara talks about a nedunya. Why was the nedunya established? The nedunya was established in order that women would not stay single. Meaning, a man sees, oh, guess what? I can marry her and she's going to bring in a nice dowry, a nice nedunya, all of which I can use, most of which I would need to compensate if we get divorced or I die, which is down the road. A woman with a nice nedunya is a more desirable, is a more desirable mate than a woman without a nedunya. Now,
A virgin and rich.
right? Now, are there poor women? Do women come from poor families? Of course. But we don't, it's interesting. Today, we don't make a distinction. Whether you come from a rich family, whether you come from a poor family, the husband accepts the financial obligation to reimburse you for your nedunya of 100 zukukim. Doesn't matter. But did any of you ever bring into your marriage?
I was enough.
There you go. All right. Right. So what do you? Right. So you have this idea that today everything is standardized. Right? It doesn't matter if the woman is poor, if the woman is, if she comes from a poor family, she comes from a wealthy family. It's standardized. That's among the Ashkenazim, not so among the Sfardim. Among the Sfardim, there are often intense negotiations as to what to write in the Ksuba. Right? Intense negotiations. I don't remember what was in my daughter's Ksuba, but I know it was like, oh my gosh. Like, right? Like $1 million, $500,000, $5 million. They literally write that amount into the Ksuba. Wow. Now, right? Why? Because it's a reflection of the way it was explained to me is that it's a reflection of the value that your son has, right? That my son has for your daughter, right? Or something like that. Right? Some variation thereof. Okay? Literally an amount written. Is there an amount written in Jenny's Ksuba? Go ahead.
My Ksuba has Me'ah written in. It's not part of the standard.
Has what written in?
Me'ah.
Okay.
It's written in.
Did I take a picture of your Ksuba? No. Okay, so the reason it's written in is the word Besula written in your Ksuba as well?
No answer.
No, we're
I'm looking for it.
She's looking for it. Don't be a wise guy. God, I have them here in class and on Zoom. Go ahead, Raylene.
It seems to me that one of the most important things should be written is that the woman is able to have children, fertility. And it's not here because what? I mean,
What does that have to do with anything?
because that is the prime purpose of the marriage is to procreate, isn't it? Isn't that an
How would they
obligation?
know?
Right. That is the prime.
She's a
No, that is the prime purpose. That is the prime purpose, which is why the husband has an obligation of onah. Right? The husband has the obligation of procreation. We touched upon this. I think we mentioned once birth control, where any halachically acceptable, right, method of birth control has to be based from the woman's side, not from the man's side. Right? Because the man is the one who has the obligation of Peru or Vu. Okay? My internet connection is unstable again. I hope you're still there. Okay.
But I thought if
We are.
there is no children, they're not able to have children, that's grounds for divorce.
That's correct. That is
How does
correct.
that work
After 10 years, the halacha is after 10 years,
So that's not
a
fair.
man is able to divorce his wife on the grounds that she can't bear him children. He's not obligated to.
But it's on the books and it's very scary.
And it's an island,
It's where in the books?
Islandit is, maybe, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that's what an islandit is. I'm not sure. Okay, anyway, all right. So good. So what do we have? So far we have Ikar Ksuba, Mizonos, Ksus, Ona, the compensation for the Nedunya of 100 Zekukim. And now we have something which is called Tosefes Ksuba. And what is that? You see here, Utzvi, blank Chasan Dinan, V'hosif La Min Delay. He adds on from his own. Od Mea Zekukim Kesef Tzaruf Acherem Kenegdan. He matches the amount that he accepts upon himself for the Nedunya of 100 Zekukim. He now adds on another 100 Zekukim. He matches that. And that is called Tosefes Ksuba. That's a sign of his kavod for this woman that he's marrying.
This is a financial document, it has nothing to do with love.
Has absolutely nothing to do with love. It is absolutely a financial document. It's like hanging your prenup on the wall, right? Or hanging your lease up on the wall, or your life insurance policy up on the wall. It's basically what it is. I mean, most people don't understand it. Right? So yes, I have flowers and hearts around it. Okay. Right? Most people don't understand it. Most people don't understand it, and that's the reason why they put it up there, because for them it's a sign of love. Right? For them it's a sign of love. And in many ways, the Chachamim understood that they couldn't legislate love.
Okay.
Right? But they could legislate conditions that would provide a fertile ground for love.
Some civility.
And what are those conditions? Not civility. Goes way beyond civility. Right? Financial security. The woman doesn't need to worry. The man doesn't have anything to hold over her head. He can't say to her, I'm not going to feed you. I'm not going to give you a place to live. I'm not going to... She is financially secure with this document. Chazal legislated that financial security. Chazal legislated that in this document there would be signs of his kavod for her. And we know, the Gemara tells us that a man is obligated to give more kavod to his wife than to himself.
So how come there's so many?
I don't know.
How did they get around?
I don't know. Okay? But that's, in other words, I can't, right? The rabbi said we can't legislate love, but we can legislate circumstances that would lead to love. Now, if you think about traditional marriages don't start with love. Why don't they start with love? How many times have they met each other?
That's true.
Right? How many times do they really know each other? They might be infatuated with each other, but there's no love. Love comes, afterwards. But these are the circumstances which are there for love. I have to talk about the value of this
It's
ksuba.
always the custom to read aloud.
It's the Ashkenazi custom to read aloud. It's not the Sephardi custom to read aloud. The reason it's the Ashkenazi custom to read aloud is because it provides a break between the Nisuin and between the Erusin and the Nisuin, between the ring ceremony, which is the engagement part of it, and the Sheva Brachos, which are the marriage part of it. It provides that hefsek, that break, right? One of the reasons that Sephardim generally don't read the Ksuba is because it's a very long document. Jenny's document is probably double the size of our document, right? And as well, it contains lots of things that are very weird. I mean, very weird, which would be very weird for everybody to hear if they were paying attention. I'll show you. Here, I'll show you this. I'll show you this. Let me just see if I can do it. Oh, I'm so sorry.
When was the first ketubah? They have a record of
They don't have a record of when the first ksuba was. I don't believe that there is a record of that. Okay?
when did it start? Like what?
So ksubos, Shimon ben Shetach, in the time of the Tanaim, which is in the Mishnaic times, legislated that these things should be written down. Were they written down before? Yeah, but probably not with the same regularity. This is Jenny's ksuba. Okay, I'm going to make it bigger and share with you. Why now is everybody's picture on the screen? I don't know how this works. Okay. Okay, so Susan, it's okay if I do this? Yeah? Okay, we won't ask Jenny. Okay, so this is so at the top part up here is all pretty much standard. Name, place, a couple of different terminologies. So for instance, they got married, right? Minyan Shanu Monin Po be Washington be no, where is it? Manhattan? No. Where did they get married? Huntington. Huntington. Can you read it? I'll make it even bigger. It's great. It's gewaldic.
Long Island.
Right? Huntington, Long Island. Right? Huntington, Long Island. Bimasa, New York. Sephardim spell New York differently. Right? In the state of New York. Da'al Kaif Yama Va'al Nahar Hudson, which is next to the Hudson River. Remember, I explained to you that in a get, we're much more precise as to the location of the place. Sfardim are much more precise in the ksuba. That's why it says. So that's one thing, okay? And then it says, and then it goes on and it says, Eich Hechasan HaBachar, and then there are abbreviations. Baruch mibanim, right? Blessed of the children, right? Yira, Zera, who should see descendants, Yarich, Yami. Very flowery, very beautiful, very poetic language. I'm telling you, I want to come back as a Sephardi, right? Beautiful, poetic language, all right? Which is there. And then his name, and then he says, Amar La, right here, the abbreviation, Amar La Lahakala Hakalula, right, the beautiful Kala and different descriptions of her. Shendel Rus the Miskeri Jennifer, right? You see here, Shendel Rus, who is called Jennifer, right? It's interesting they didn't put right. Bas Yisrael, right, the daughter of Yisrael, who is called Jimmy. I think that's what it says, right? Right, who is called Jimmy. Right, it's very specific. You can read it there. Right, who's called Jimmy. I don't know, Jimmy. It's a little bit strange to read, but that's it. Okay, and then the ksuba has some of the usual stuff, and then the ksuba has some other fascinating things in it. Talks about nimtza bein nidunya, right? Between in other words, she's bringing in the nidunya. So between the Nedunya and everything else that he wants to add, v'tosefes hakol, how much is it going to be? What is this dollar amount right here? Chameshes alafim, 5,000, v'chamesh meos, 500, u'shmona asrei, and shmona esrei, and $18 darzot dabrit. No, in other words, what happened, right? In an Ashkenazi ksuba, the husband says, I'll accept upon myself the obligation for your nedunya of 100 skukim. And then I'm going to give you a tosefes ksuba of 100 skukim. But that's all that's mentioned is 100, and it's standard. What's here? Here it says, I'm going to accept the obligations of your nedunya upon myself, and I'm going to give you a tosefes ksuba. And how much is that going to total? $5,518. Where did that come from? Where did $5,518 come from? So even in the Sephardic world, there's a standard amount that's put into the ksuba, right? So this was the tradition of what they had to put in the ksuba. I've seen ksubos with $1 million in it, right? So, and again, it's a sign of, it's a sign of kavod. right? Now remember, this is a Sephardi boy marrying an Ashkenazi girl. So they, if it was a Sephardi boy marrying a Sephardi girl, the father of the Sephardi girl might push back on this. Right? Might push back on this, say that's not enough. And then all these negotiations take place. It's
So
fascinating.
the guy has to give that money, not the girl.
He doesn't have to give this money. This is the amount of money that he accepts upon himself,
Oh, okay.
right?
Yeah, I get it.
When the marriage dissolves or he dies as compensation for the Nedunya plus the Tosefes Ksuba. Okay, I'm so sorry. All right,
In those days,
here we go. How much is all of this worth in dollars? Right? What is the financial settlement that she's going to get? Now remember, in addition to whatever this financial settlement is, this financial settlement is composed of three things: the Ikar Ksuba, the Tosefes Ksuba, right? And the amount that he accepted upon himself for the Nedunya. Those are the three things, right? So generally it's broken down into two categories in our Ksuba, which is 200 zuz, which is the Ikar Ksuba, 100 Zekukim Kesef for the Nedunya, and another 100 Zekukim Kesef for the Tosefes Ksuba. How much is this worth? So zuz, we know. Zuz is, there are, when you think of shkalim, that's a shekel is something that we're familiar with as a coinage, right? A shekel. When you do a pidyon haben, you have to give the kohen 5 shkalim, right? What are 5 shkalim? Right? They are 5 pieces of silver. They have to be 5 pieces of silver. Real silver. So how much is 200 zuz? 200 zuz is equal to 50 shkalim. It's equal to 50 shkalim. All right? How much silver is 50 shkalim equal to? Approximately 1,000 grams of silver. 1,000 grams of pure silver. Pure silver, right? So how much is silver worth today? I don't know, somebody, right? Whatever, any of you are silver traders?
$800 an ounce or something.
Are you guessing?
Yes.
Okay, right? Whatever an ounce of silver is, multiply that by 1,000, and that is the Ikar Ksuba. Is it a lot?
in today's world with inflation,
In today's world, is it a lot? No, it's not a lot at all. Not a lot at all. The
Well,
Ikar
not
Ksuba is not a
compared to
lot,
gold.
right? It's not a lot. Even if it's $800, what's 800 times 1,000?
8,000.
Right? No. 800 times 1,000 is 80,000, isn't it?
80,000.
Okay. All right, Sharon is saying silver is only $25.86 an ounce.
Right.
Correct. Yeah, one.
Okay. So, all right. So wait a second. So if you go by the classic amounts, the ksuba does not seem to be, the ksuba part of it does not seem to be that significant. However, there's another way of evaluating 200 zuz. Susan hinted at it, and that is, we know from Chad Gadya, right, that a goat costs Trey Zuze. One goat, right, costs 2 zuzim. So figure out how much does a goat go for today? How much does a goat go for today? And that's the value of 2 zuzim. Multiply that by 200, by 100, because it's 200 zuzim, and you'll come up with an amount. That's still, I'm telling you, it's still not going to be, right? Still not a tremendous amount of money. But what else here? Interestingly, we have there's an opinion that a person who has 200 zuz is not able to collect charity from the community. Why? Because of the belief that 200 zuz is the cost of food and clothing for a year. If you have 200 zuz, so you could live for a year, and you're not entitled to collect stuck unless you have less than 200 zuz. Okay? So what does that mean? So what's another way of calculating the 200 zuz? Another way of calculating 200 zuz is what's the cost of food and clothing for a year in society today? Right? You can figure that out, right? The cost of food and clothing, right? The cost of food and clothing, you could figure that out, right? You could figure that out.
That depends where you live.
And of course, it depends on where you live. It might be more in New York. It might be less in I don't know, Arkansas, right? But whatever it is, you can come up to a value with that, right? Now remember, that's the lump sum that the woman is going to get in addition to housing, in addition to food and everything else. We haven't touched upon the zekukim at all. According to Rav Moshe, the 200 zekukim is a much greater value, right? In fact, Rav Moshe says 200 zekukim is equal to 100 pounds of silver. A zakuk was a coin that was very heavy. So Rav Moshe says 200 zekukim is equal to 100 pounds of silver. And that's bottom line, this is not enforceable in a civil court. So since it's not enforceable in a civil court, it has very little meaning other than to serve as a guideline. Now, if a couple were to get divorced solely through a bezdin, right? Meaning that the bezdin would officiate at the get, and the bezdin would also determine childcare, and the bezdin would also determine the distribution of marital assets. Thank you, marital assets. Right? So the bezdin would clearly take this financial obligation into consideration, right? And make an award accordingly. But most people choose not to have a bezdin adjudicate the divorce, right? For particular reasons, whatever it is, we can talk about those reasons offline if you want, but they do that. Okay, we're done with the ksuba. We're done with the ksuba. Next week, at the beginning, very quickly, halachic will, and then back to Chumash. Everybody have a great day.